Shabbat Shalom. This is one of about half a dozen so-called special Shabbats. This weekend is called Shabbat Shirah, or the Sabbath of Song. Some other Shabbatot are deemed special because of the holidays they precede. Shabbat Zachor, which is in a few weeks, is the Shabbat before Purim. Shabbat Hagadol is the Shabbat before Passover. Shabbat Shirah is special not because it precedes a specific holiday, although it's always close to Tu B'Shvat, the birthday of the trees, and we'll get back to that connection in a moment, but because of the content of this week's Torah reading itself. This Sabbath of Song is the Shabbat on which we read the Song of the Sea. Now, perhaps we should back up a little bit for context. The weekly Torah reading is the first serialized drama that I'm aware of, our As the World Turns soap opera. So just in case you're tuning in with us now, let me give you, in previous episodes, an introductory vignette. A few weeks ago, Jacob's sons, also known as the children of Israel, needed to sojourn to Egypt in order to survive a famine and to reunite with their estranged brother Joseph. They not only survive, but thrive in Egypt, and all is well for a while until there arose a king that did not know Joseph or the Israelites. Fearful of their prolific nature and the demographic impact on his country, the Pharaoh imposes a series of increasingly harsh restrictions of Israelite freedom. The children of Israel are plunged into servitude and abject despondency. Later, some Hebrew midwives and an Egyptian-born freedom fighter, with hints from the Holy One, start to persist and resist and insist that the Pharaoh let my people go. God seems to side with the underdog, sends 10 unmistakable and unshakable supernatural signs, and Pharaoh's arm is twisted. Okay, I'll let your people go. That was all in previous episodes. Check out the podcast, it's great. But this week's Parsha begins, Exodus 13:17. Now when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the land of the Pelishtim, although it was nearer. If you're familiar with our Jewish renewal psycho-spiritual lens, you'll know we're reading this text on levels much deeper than the surface. We read Torah not as a story that once happened, but as a story that is happening, an ongoing process within each of us. Regarding the many commandments, or mitzvot in the Torah, there's a concept in Rabbinic Judaism of being yotzei mechovato, having discharged one's obligation. This idea of being yotzei mechovato, or yotze for short, is linked with the language of Exodus itself, of Yitziat Mitzrayim, of going out of Egypt. Being yotze is getting out of the way, so to speak, of your religious duties. But Jewish renewal is a child of the Hasidic movement, and to be a Chassid means to be full of chesed, to be a lover. A lover goes above and beyond the letter of the law. A lover leans in, wants to know the will of God and lovingly serve that divine purpose. Probably a better idiom than going above and beyond would be to go deeply within. Not to be yotze, or exiled, or outside, but to kanes, to enter, to be inside, to come home. We actually want to join Shekhinah, or God's presence, wherever we may have exiled her, or think we are devoid of her in our lives. Vayehi Beshallach Paro, when Pharaoh ejects and pushes out, Velo Nacham Elohim, and God takes us on a circuitous route, we know this is an inside teaching. We've all been living in the school of life. Each and every one of us here knows about the longer, shorter way. We know there are no true shortcuts in life or on the spiritual path. We know that this journey through the wilderness, this desert wandering, finding our own calling is often mysterious and seemingly circuitous. And if you've read this Parsha before, or this story is dimly ringing some bell, you probably remember or intuit where this narrative is going, that we are going to end up between a rock and a hard place. Although the story goes, Hashem went before them in a pillar of cloud by day to guide them along the way, and a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they may travel night and day. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from them before the people, that nonetheless we, the mixed multitude leaving Egypt, are going to find ourselves trapped. On one side by an uncrossable, insurmountable sea, and on the other by a relentlessly pursuing, power-hungry, and bloodthirsty army. And then, a few long lines along in our narrative, comes a verse that in all other years I simply glanced over, but this year jumps out to me as a clear practice instruction. Exodus 14, verses 1 and 2. And Hashem said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp before Piachirot, between Migdol and the sea, before Baal Tzifon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea." Torah, on the most fundamental level, is trying to teach us of the unity of life. The traditional mystical idiom has it that God, Torah, and Israel are one. Or in a more modern formulation, admittedly influenced by Buddhism and transpersonal psychology, we might say that consciousness, creation, and creatures are all intimately interdependent and interpenetrating. Everything is the one mind pervading and surrounding all life. The Baal Shem Tov, speaking in the 17th century, exhorted we should have a threefold love: a love of God, a love of Torah, and a love of all Jews. Or Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. This holy teaching still speaks to us when the spark of this teaching is rekindled in secular language, that we should love consciousness, love all flavors of knowledge and wisdom, and love each other and all creation, without exception. But we know that this powerful love, this abiding wakefulness, this enduring presence is sometimes a difficult level to reach and even harder one to maintain. We're occasionally content with the stories of the righteous ones who can soar to these heights, parables featuring saints and holy ones. I don't think we should be so content. The Torah teaches Kulam Kedoshim. We are all supposed to aspire, each on our own level, to the vision of this mystical oneness. The Stoics of ancient Greece philosophized on how to attain the good life. They well understood the misery generated when we perceive a gap between what we want and what we have. Their form of philosophy wasn't esoteric or theoretical. Theirs was a street philosophy where results matter. The practical solution the Stoics offer is by flipping this script, not to continue to pursue happiness by trying to get what we don't have, but rather by wanting what we do have. In Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Sages, this same teaching is given over as who is wealthy, the one who is happy with their lot, Sameach Bechelko. And I mean to offer this Devar Torah in a very practical way. I love the winter time when it brings me deep into stillness and my sitting mindfulness practices. And as anyone who's ever tried to sit still for any amount of time knows, there will be 10,000 distractions and frustrations and irritations along the way, especially if we resist them. It's the nature of one aspect of mind to flitter and flutter and fluster us in this way. But I've been sitting with this stoic, Sameach Bechelko guidance, and I promise you it is transformative. As I notice that itch or irritation or anger, by mentally saying, I want this irritation, I embrace this itch, this anger is what is happening now, an amazing thing happens. When I am present to what I have, it seems like I'm no longer the one who has anything, in the sense that I'm no longer separate from that thing I was resisting. A division and thus a tension is resolved. So the teaching verse begins, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp. Vayashuvu vayanachu. We can read turn back and encamp as sit and be still. Yishuv hada'at is a phrase meaning a settled mind. In terms of the Pardes model of hermeneutics, where are there at least 4 concurrent modes of meaning in every word of the Torah, what we've been talking of is the sod, or secret level. The work we are doing now, these insights into text, this gift of exploring these mysteries, this yearning for self-actualization sits actually at the very top of what psychologist Abraham Maslow identified as a human hierarchy of needs. But Maslow's period rests on a broad and solid foundation. Our primary task and foundation is safety. That's the pshat, the basic foundational meaning. We can't easily have yishuv hada'at, a settled mind, without a sense of safety in our own bodies and nervous systems. This is ground zero, our baseline. Safety is our top priority. As Franz Kafka put it, you do not need to leave your room. Remain sitting at your table and listen. Do not even listen, simply wait. Do not even wait. Be quite still and solitary. Quite still. Vayeshuvu vayanachu lifnei pi hacherut. Return and encamp. Sit and be still before pi hachirot. I told you, in years past, I just glossed over this. I certainly wasn't going to pull out an ancient map and look up the supposed Israelite escape route to research or reconstruct some sort of imagined military sortie. But this year, the names of these places glistened like dew on spring flowers, flirting from other worlds with me. So I checked out what medieval commentator Rashi had to say about this line. He informs us that this place is called Pi Hachirot because there they became Bnei Chorin, free people. Chirut is explained as cherut, freedom. So the eponym for this place is the spot where they became free. Is it possible that this is the same place or points the way to a place that we too can become free? Rashi further says that the place named Pi Hachirot is, quote, identical with another place called Pitom. To this we can respond in modern Hebrew, Ma Pitom. Why, all of a sudden, ma pitom, should we return and encamp and sit on the edge of freedom? Can there be instant enlightenment and all at once awareness of the one? Pi hacherut literally means the lip or edge of freedom. And the verb shuv, to return, to do tshuva, to come back to wherever you honestly are. To have what you have, to encamp, rest, dwell in the boat of your rocking awareness. Sit, mind agape at this opening. Sitting on the teetering edge of freedom is described, as the verse continues, as ben migdal uven hayam, between another place, this one called Migdal, which means fortress, and Hayam, the sea, Lifnei Baal Tzefon, before yet another place called Baal Tzefon, or the master of mystery. Let's unpack each of these coordinates in our own experience. We each need a fortress, a form. Migdol Yeshuot Malko. We need to feel safe and secure. We know quiet and simplicity and gentleness and time are some of the ingredients of the contemplative life. As we sit upright or stand in prayer, finding center and balance, falling up, supported by gravity, our heads supporting the sky, we create a tower and dedicate it to the practice of uncovering our oneness and belonging to the universe. Yet Migdal can be a form of rigidity. We can climb to the ivory towers of our minds and remain aloof from the sensory world. We can cut off from our hearts and spiritually bypass the world. There is a dark side to meditation. We can become impenetrable, cut off, and closed down. On the other side of this precipice to freedom is the sea, Hayam. The Hebrew for sea comes from a much more ancient Canaanite word for the goddess of the sea, Yama. She is cognate with the depths, with Tehom or Tiamat. Her depths are the opposite of the heights of the fortress. The ocean has the power to submerge. Far from rigidity, her chaos and constant motion disorients and pulls us deep below. Dr. Dan Siegel is a contemporary neuroscientist who makes the claim that every disorder listed in the DSM-5, or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, can be seen as a dysfunction of two poles, chaos and rigidity. Life flows in an integrated way when we find a balance between the two, the space between too much structure or resistance on one hand and too little predictability or order on the other. The space between is what Dan calls the river of integration. On one side, the fortress, the rigid, the impenetrable. On the other side, the ocean, endlessly rocking sea, the depths. The spot where they became free is between the fortress and the sea, Bein Migdal uvein Hayam. And these two landmarks orient us to a third, Baal Tzifon, the master of what is hidden. Tzafon means both treasure or storehouse, a place where precious things are hidden away, and also refers to the north. The biblical directions, which are different than the cartographic conceptions of north, south, east, and west, have some resonance with what is known in indigenous American wisdom as the medicine wheel. Yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba, Yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba, is often translated as west and east, north and south, but the literal meaning of these words orient those familiar with the land of Israel to very familiar landmarks. West is Yama, or towards the sea. East is Kedma, towards the beginning, or towards Eden. Tzafona is toward the treasure, or the fertile north, and Negba means toward the south, or dry land. The Native American medicine wheel, as eco-philosopher Bill Plotkin writes, is associated with the four compass directions, the diurnal cycle of sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight, and the four seasons. In the wheel, east carries all the valences of new light, birth, spring, beginnings, awakenings, and more. The south, as we continue around the circle clockwise, represents summer, growth, playfulness, healing. The west is autumn, endings, shadow, soul discovery, and the north calls forth winter, dark, stillness, teaching, service, and more. This reading adds even more richness to the word for fortress. Migdol is from the verb migadel, to raise, rear, or bring up. A tower is something that grows up from the ground. In the east, the place of new growth, a tower. In the west, the sea, a place of endings and soul discoveries. And just as every day cycles through sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight, and the year cycles through spring, summer, fall, and winter, so do our lives cycle through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and elderhood. And so does every breath move through inhalation, retention, exhalation, and pause. The four-letter name, Havaya. Tell the Israelites to be quite still and sit before the opening to freedom. Find the river of integration between chaos and rigidity. Be solitary before the mystery. We have to unpack just a few more words. Are you still with me? I hope so. We have 40 years of wilderness wandering ahead of us. Nicho tanchu al hayam, encamp facing the sea. Nichoach means to face, to be present to show up in our lives, to allow the presence of the one source to be present to us, to not create conceptual divisions. One of the Baal Shem Tov's most famous teachings is that wherever a person's thoughts are, there they are, shamhu. A person can be found wherever their thoughts can be found. But we can also hear the Baal Shem Tov saying, wherever your thoughts are, God is too. Shamhu, Allahu, hu, God is there. In those thoughts, in those so-called distractions. Forget the war on alien thoughts during prayer. God is wherever you let God in. Interestingly, this is completely consonant with the Native American Lenape conception for God. Kishlim Wekong is the creator God, the one who dreams creation, also the one in whom the thought of the world arises. Nochach means present in the grammatical sense, present tense, as opposed to past tense, which is nistar, or hidden, not visible. What is not happening now, whether past or future, is hidden from us, hidden from what is present. What is present is to use turning to facing to hear the song of the sea. Which, finally, brings us back to our parsha. Shabbat Shirah, the Sabbath of song. This week we read the song of Moses and the song of Miriam, the song of the crossing of the sea. From that perilous rock in a hard place moment, the improbable happens. The sea splits and we are free. This is a split that connects, a cut that binds, an integrative moment of healing that brings us into balance and presence. By having those half a dozen special Shabbatot, it means that some parts of the Torah are read more than once a year. When you look in a parchment scroll, you can see some places. Take the new moon reading, for example, where the ink is somewhat more weathered. The rabbis who canonized the prayer book included the Song of the Sea as a reading for every single day of the year. Every day. Every season, every moment, every breath is an epic sonic search for the song of the universe, the one song of all creation. Perhaps this is one reason why Maggid Yitzchak Buxbaum of blessed memory wrote that Tu B'Shvat is the most advanced spiritual holiday in Judaism, the holiday of holidays. The form of the song as it is written in the scroll is a lattice work, the form of the Kabbalistic tree of life, a weave of black and white fire, a fortress and an ocean, a hot season and a cold season, a dry season, a wet season, an inhalation and an exhalation. May we all be blessed with an eternal Shabbat Shirah in our hearts, with the gift to be able to hear the melody of God's will for us, and to sing along in harmony. May we rest and encamp in our bodies and souls, and may that song harmonize with all life and all the worlds. Shabbat Shirah Shalom. Let us sing a song for Shabbat. Let us sing a song for Shabbat. Let us sing a song for Shabbat. Let us sing